Guys, it's Kelly here, and I am doing my first video for the Make It Crafty blog. So I wanted to watercolor a background behind my image. So I went ahead and applied some Grumbacher liquid frisket, and I just applied it all over my image. Then once it's dry, you can just paint right over it. I chose to mask this way instead of doing paper because she has all these little intricate areas in her hair where the background will show through, and I just didn't want to take the time to cut a whole mask, so this was just easier. I'm using distressing to do my background. I just rub it right down on my Ranger craft mat and then pick it up with a wide brush. I don't tape down my images. I don't tape down my projects, whatever, because it's just not worth the paper that I waste. Speaking of paper, this is Canson Aquarelle. I'm sure I'm butchering that, but it's 140 pound. It's like a blue and black package. That's what the notebook part looks like. So I have no problem with that going through my printer. This is a digital image. It's called Breezy Buttercup, and I just completely fell in love with her. That hair just sucked me right in. I wish my hair looked like that in real life. Oh gosh. So for the grass, I'm using Twisted Citron and some mowed lawn. This is just a really easy way to just drop in your background. Now, I do want to warn you with the liquid frisket, it is liquid, and your printer ink is probably not waterproof. Mine is not. So when you put it on, it does smear the ink. Now, I haven't had a huge problem with it because when you roll up the mask and remove it, it usually takes most of the ink with it. So I just really haven't had any problems with it ruining my image once I start coloring on top of it. Now, obviously, you could also color the image with watercolors if you wanted to do that. I like the look of the soft background, and a lot of times I will use Distress Inks and a foam applicator to do that. But like I said, those little areas in between her hair were I didn't want to risk it. So when I did the sky and the grass, I didn't touch them together right away. I did the top area first, and then I left just like a sliver in between when I applied the water for my grass. I blotted up all the extra off my image, and then I dried it with my heat tool. I have just like a kneading eraser that I pick up my mask with and haven't had any problems. And I'll zoom in before I start coloring. So, here, this is how you fix the little tricky tricks in case your masking isn't perfect, and mine never is. I just find a color that matches my background of my Copics, and I go back in and just add that to the outline. I would rather go over and have some white in my background than have blue or green on my image. So here I'm just going to start with her skin tone. This is a different skin tone color for me because normally E00, how many zeros did I say? E with the 4 zeros. E with the 4 zeros is the one I usually use for my lightest color, but I'm out and I don't have a refill. So I did order it. I'm waiting for it to come in the mail, but so I did a little bit of looking online to see something else that maybe I would like. So I ended up with E00 and E11, and then with a V12 is my darkest shadow. And when I first started putting it down, I was like, oh no, I think I've gotten in over my head here, folks. Because it was next to all that stark white. But in the end, I actually ended up liking it. I think it came out fairly well. It was just really scary there in the beginning. I'm certainly not a Copic expert. I'm completely self-taught, so I'm still learning and messing around with it, just like everybody else is, trying to figure out what I like best or what's going to work for me. So yeah, this image, she's so cute. I mean, just absolutely adorable. And she's got all that hair blowing around. Oh, I just absolutely loved it. Hair is like a love-hate thing for me because I see these images with all these hair and then I'm like, oh my god, I love them and I want to color them and it's going to be so pretty, and then like halfway through the hair I'm like, what in God's name were you thinking? This is so much hair. You've been sitting here for an hour and you're still coloring hair. And then at the end of it, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this only took an hour. I love the way her hair looks. So yeah, see here, you can even see on the left-hand side of her face right now, it looks just super dark. And then I'm going to go in and add a little bit of R20 to make her cheeks a little bit pinker. And then I was really like, what did you do? But it gets better. It doesn't stay that way. It gets better. So back to the liquid frisket that picks up your ink color. The reason that this isn't a problem for me is because I always outline all of my images after I'm done with them. If you don't want to do that, you could certainly leave it the way it is. It'll just be a lighter pencil line, so it will look closer to a no line coloring look. I just don't prefer that. So here with her shorts, I decided to go in with some grays, and they have a little scalloped edge. So I really wanted to play up those little pleats, and you just have to have a super light hand. You're using the flicking motions, but you don't want to be too heavy-handed with it, or you'll lose the highlight, and the highlight is what gives it the texture. So I actually took Zoe's what is it called? Fabrics and Folds, I think is what it is. And I can't even tell you how much I learned from that. It was so good and so informative. So I'm super glad that I took it. And I actually took it before I was part of the team. I so was recommending it before I was part of the team too. So completely unbiased recommendation. It's so good if you aren't sure. And I used to look at so many people's projects and think, well, I really love the way that looks. I really wish I could do that. But I just didn't even know how to get started. My college degree is in criminal justice. It's not an art. This is my hobby. So yeah, I'm just going in and just using, again, those little light flicks of color. So that way it just keeps those highlights intact. And originally I had thought that I was going to do my light source from the bottom right. Eventually, I'm not even going to lie to you, I stopped even worrying about what the light source was. I just colored, and it still came out fine. I'm still perfectly happy with it. Definitely need to work on my light source coloring. I always start out with good intentions, and then, well, then it just happens like it happens, I guess. So, yeah, I really love, I wanted the Buttercups, obviously, to be yellow. And purple and yellow are complementary colors on the color wheel. So I knew that they were going to be very striking together. And the big blue, I just couldn't resist those big blue eyes. I feel like blue's a neutral. I feel like blue goes with everything. Blue's not actually neutral, but in my world, it totally is. So I just did a little bit of shading in those smaller areas. Sometimes it's hard to get in there and get good shading. I started out with 4 colors originally, and then I actually ended up going back in and adding Y19 because I didn't feel like my Y08 and my what is that? Hold on. My Y38 blended very well. So here's why I'm showing you this tip. It started like leaking out all over the place on me. And when that happens, if you take the cap off of the other end of your marker, it like neutralizes all of that pooling. It helps the color to become more, I don't even know what's the grounded? No. Like neutral. Like it evens out. I don't know what the word. I swear to God, I'm not an idiot. I can't think of the word I want. But it stops it from blowing out all over your project and ruining everything that you just did. So that's really all you need to know. So then I went in with some greens. It's the same greens that I'm going to be using in the grass. I'll zoom out here so you can see that. I didn't want to get too detailed with the grass portion of it because I didn't want to take away from her. I felt like she was the focal point of the image, and this was just a little bit of window dressing. So I did some really just quick flicks of color, and I did it in a light, a medium, and a darker green, but the medium I only used in that right hand corner, and the dark I really only used right around her, so she would be more of the focal point, and everything else could just be soft and fade out into the background. I love creating little scenes and things and adding bunches of details, but I wanted all of my details to be on her. I just, yeah, that's just the way that I preferred to do the card. So we're gonna get started on her hair, and hair, like I said, it's a love-hate thing. It's very time-consuming process if you want it to look a certain way. But I don't know about you, I got into this hobby because I like to color and I like to make things and I like to create. So the time doesn't really bother me so much. I mean, there are times when you're sitting there and you're like, oh my God, I cannot believe I've been sitting here for an hour. But then the end result totally makes it worth it. You know, you just color and go off in your little world, and at the end you got something pretty. So like most people with their Copics, you want to leave a highlight where it's closest to you, and where it's furthest away is going to be darker. I always start with my lightest color, and it's where I lay in my shadows with my lightest color. This is just what's most comfortable for me. If I try to start with my dark, it will inevitably be too dark. There will be no highlight left. It just gets eaten away. Here I must be trying to figure out what's what with something. Sometimes with an image like this that has all that hair, it can get a little bit confusing. So just take your time and figure it out as you need to. What's going to be behind, what's going to be up front. And again, I'm just using a really light hand and those flicking motions. When you start with your lightest color, it's easy to fix if you mess it up. Like if you accidentally put a shadow where you need a highlight, nobody's going to notice because you'll be able to go back in and fix it. If you start with your dark and you put a shadow where you need a highlight, it's gone. I mean, you can use your colorless blender to try to lift it up, but you're only going to be able to get so much lifted. So now that I'm done with the E50, I'm going to start in with the E53. One of the things I love about Zoe's images is the way that she does her hair. It's easy to see where it bends and twists when you're looking at a single strand. And so it's super simple to figure out where that shading is going to need to go. And for people like me, you know, I'm not an artist. I'm not a Copic expert. I'm not any of those things. So those little guidelines are so helpful, especially when you have something like this where there is just so much hair and you're doing it and doing it and doing it. So yeah, I've recently learned how to kind of leave that highlights around the edges, where before I would, you know, I would cover everything pretty much. You know, I wouldn't leave a highlighted edge. I would leave a highlighted middle, or like this one here where it's bumped up, I would leave, you know, that section uncolored. But after taking some of those e-books or the e-classes from Zoe, I learned how to, you know, leave that kind of that natural highlight, and then also to not just use the feathering motions, but how you can extend them. You could use your Copic to actually like extend that line and draw it. I always felt like that would make it look too like fake or just not blended well. And there is a way to do it so that that it doesn't look that way, so that it still looks super pretty and blended and like you meant to do it, so that it looks intentional. This blonde color is one of my favorite combinations. It's E50, 53, 55, and a little bit of 57. I just think it's such a good blend, and it's a natural blending group. Any with your Copics, anything that starts and all has the same number at the beginning is a natural blending family. So these all start with 5, so they were like meant to be. They were just meant to go together. I use a hex chart, and that's how I figure out what colors I want to use. So sometimes you'll see on there that even though somebody's in the same family together, maybe there's other colors that you could use. But this one, I mean, is natural blending group, and it's so good. So after I do my initial coat, and I'm still working on that, this is going to be my second darkest color, but it's going to be the last one that I put all over. The E57 I'm only going to put in and add just little bits where I want it to be the absolute darkest. Then I always go in reverse. So I go lightest to darkest and then darkest to lightest. And I just feel like that gives me the best blend for what I'm trying to do. And you know, that might not be what works for you. So you do whatever works for you, because, you know, this happy is about doing what makes you happy. And I know some of my own, if you're watching this on YouTube and you're not watching this on the Make It Crafty blog, some of my followers have asked for a tutorial on how to work with digital images, and I had no problem doing that, except for when I went to go do it, I had realized that Zoe already did one, and it's phenomenal. So I will link to that in the description below, and I will also link to that on my own personal blog, so that you can go check that out, because she just made it such a cakewalk. And I even learned, you know, some things about her, especially about building a scene and the ways that you can put these images together. Yeah, just super cool. I was doing it I mean, I was doing it, but I was doing it a much harder way. So thanks, Zoe, for the super good advice. Here we're getting to be where it's back behind her, and like I said, anything that's in the back is always going to be darker. So I didn't even do like the hair in between her legs and the hair to like the left and right of her legs. I didn't even really do too much shading. I left it pretty dark because that is behind her. So here again, it's going to be behind her head, so that's going to be fairly dark. There's not going to be much of a highlight there. Sometimes I think I should probably go darker, but I'm full disclosure, I'm kind of scared. Sometimes I'm just a little scared to add too much dark and lose all my light, because I'm has such a tendency to do that. But I know the contrast will make your image more realistic. So if you're feeling like something needs to be darker, it probably does. Here we're going to the E57, and we're just adding the little bits in the parts that are going to be the absolute darkest, or in the parts that I want to fall to the back. So there's some parts in her hair that aren't like full strands. They're just like little snippets of strands, and I'm going to make those darker so they really just fall behind. Now, looking at this, right now it almost looks like a no line coloring image as far as her hair goes, because those lines are so fine. Like I said, I outline all my images because I prefer I just prefer a bold black line. That might not be your thing. So at this point, you could just not do that portion, you know, and it would still be a beautiful image. This is where we're going back through just with my second to lightest color. I could have, if I had used the E57 all over, I would have gone back through with the E55 first, but since I used such a minimal amount, I didn't really feel like it was necessary. So I just went straight back to the E53 and blended that out. Now there is a section in the middle, it's right by my left ring finger, that I just straight missed. That thing has E50 on it, and that's it. And it should be dark. It should be falling to the back. So I do catch it later on. Oh, here, look it, right there. Because, you know, it's hard to get everything when you're going through, and there's, you know, so many objects to be colored, so things get missed. I think her earrings I didn't even get until after I turned off the camera. I was like doing my outline and was like, what happened there? So, you know, don't worry, as long as you haven't shipped it off in the mail, it's not too late to fix it. So this is the lightest color. Gonna blend that back through, and then shortly thereafter I'll be starting on my outline. I didn't leave that part in here because this video is already so long, and I completely understand that. She just had so much hair and I didn't want to cut any part out in case that's what you were watching for. However, I'm completely open to suggestions, so please let me know if you don't mind if I cut that part out, or if there's a specific part you want me to leave in, or if you want me to do a video on a specific thing, period. I'm down for all of that. So here this is the outline to make her eyes a little bit bolder. I'm using a 0.65, and then I'm going to outline the rest of her in a 0.25 because that's a little bit of a lighter line. And again, didn't leave that part in, just a little bit of her eyes. And then here we're finishing up the outline. So that's pretty much going to be it. I did stamp sentiment and then add some sequins because I can't like make a card without sequins nowadays. So yeah, so thank you for joining me, and I hope that you really enjoyed the card. Oh, shadow, forgot about the shadow. We're going to add in just a little bit, just a little one. Just a little bit of a shadow because she felt like she was just standing there on nothing and wasn't very grounded. So yeah, so leave me your suggestions. Let me know what you think. I'm open to all of that. And thank you for visiting the Make It Crafty blog. You can go, I listed my Copics below on the blog. And then I also linked to Breezy Buttercup because she's absolutely adorable. And so are all of the other images in the Spring Kids collection. So, oh, and our challenge is Shades of Black and White. So join that too. All right, thanks guys. See you later.